Welcome into episode 161 or season 5, episode 16 of the Canucks Speakeasy podcast. My name is Doug.
I'm Brendan, aka Jabo.
And Brendan, we've got 6-game flight to talk about. So why don't you start it off?
Yeah, we haven't done a show for a little while, so we're going way back. Canucks in Pittsburgh. Uh, Canucks with a fantastic first period. Besser with a couple of goals. Pettersson with a goal. Actually, both Petterssons in the game with a goal in that first period. Both Marcus and Elias with a goal. Really, just some bad luck at the end. Puck goes in late in the game. The Canucks actually blow a third period lead, but wind up Pettersson with a beautiful OT winner. Canucks win 4-3.
In a game I don't even remember happening, the Canucks went to Buffalo and played the Buffalo Sabres and came away with a 1-0 victory, apparently. Sam Lafferty was your one goal scorer, and Nikita Zadorov had an assist.
What were you doing?
It was just such a boring game.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, then if that was boring, then this was just disappointing. I mean, it wasn't very surprising. The Canucks, after just hellish travel to get from Buffalo to Columbus, that saw them go from Buffalo to Toronto to Columbus and wind up in Columbus late before a game that started at 1. The Canucks, playing their 7th game in 12 nights, really had no energy left when they went to Columbus, and yet put themselves in a position to win the game. They were up late in the third. Goal gets scored. And they lose to Columbus 4-3 in a shootout.
The Canucks then went home to host the Arizona Coyotes on Pride Night and came away with a 2-1 victory. Travis Dermott, who put the Pride tape on earlier in the season as a big screw you to the league, was the lone goal scorer for the Arizona Coyotes. We usually don't shout out opposing team goal scorers, but I think Dermott, former Canuck, definitely deserves a shutout there. And Dakota Joshua and Elias Pettersson each had a goal. Petey, I believe, had the game-winning goal in this game as well.
Well, and then the matchup that we all wait for, Saturday night, Canucks Leafs. Canucks get off to a great start. 3 goals in the first period, 2 from Hoglander, 1 from Garland. And then all of a sudden, as Rick Tocchet said, they got a little cocky and got a little proud of themselves. As that second period, really, things turned pretty dramatically until late in the second period, when Connor Garland retook the lead as the Canucks blew a 3-goal lead in the second period. Marner with a shorthanded goal in the third, but then the Canucks with 2 power play goals from Miller and Pettersson. They beat the Leafs 6-4.
The Canucks then hosted the Chicago Blackhawks in what was meant to be Connor Bedard's first game in Vancouver. Unfortunately, he broke his jaw earlier in the year and is missing 6 to 8 weeks. Canucks came away with a 2-0 victory. Andrei Kuzmenko in that first period really showed that he still has something in the engine. He was even out there in the final seconds of the game for Rick Tocchet, which was great to see. Quinn Hughes with another goal, and Pius Suter, who probably could have had 2 or 3 goals last night, came away with the second goal.
Well, it's another stretch with a lot of wins. I mean, this is sort of, for anybody who's done a Canucks podcast, this is really uncharted. Yeah, just uncharted waters. It's hard to explain with this team. I put out a stat that now it could be 21 games now. The Canucks in the last 21 games have not been down by any more than a single goal, except in one game. The fact that they haven't had a multi-goal deficit in the last 21 games, that's pretty staggering stuff. But it's it shows how well this team's playing, how well they're playing defensively, and obviously, they're the goaltending as well.
Well, even their end of the road trip game against Columbus, which obviously, like you alluded to, was a letdown, they still came away with a point. You know what I mean? And, that was not their best game. They were tired.
No.
I think you said it was 7 games in 12 nights. Still managed to squeeze a point out of the Columbus Blue Jackets. This team looks really good. And, I would say the last handful of games, I think it kind of started. The Buffalo game had a little bit of an edge to it, I believe. But that Arizona game, which you wouldn't think would be a real physical game, that was a really physical game. And it was nice to see the Canucks kind of come away with that victory and kind of answer the bell. That one guy, I don't know who he was. He looked like an extra from Lord of the Rings. I don't mean to be disrespectful. He just looked like a dwarf. He had the big beard, the long hair.
O'Brien.
I think is his name. Yeah. He was running around and, he tried to go after Lafferty because Lafferty had thrown a couple of big hits on some of their star players. And Zadorov kind of answered the bell with him, but it was just a good physical game. And I made the joke about the Buffalo game, but I do remember that being a bit of a physical game as well, as Lafferty again throwing some big hits.
But JT Miller as well with the hit on Rasmus Dahlin that kind of got that all going, because then it kind of started this, an attempt at retaliation, and they were really going at Quinn Hughes hard, trying to get back at him, and the nice thing for the Canucks is Quinn Hughes is very elusive and very hard to hit, just because his skating is so, so on a level that most players aren't, and his edge work is just incredible. So it's hard to size him up and zero in on him, because he's probably going to be gone by the time you go to hit him. But you're right, it's nice to see. It's something that I brought up. I think it was sometime last year that my assumption was that this management group was going to look to get bigger on the back end, because there's this belief, and they're not wrong, that when it comes to playoff time, that the teams with the bigger defense cores wind up, if you're lucky enough to go deep in the playoffs, wind up surviving longer, because they're the ones handing out the punishment, and are the ones capable of withstanding it more so than if you have a smallish defense. Which the Canucks, outside of Quinn Hughes, who's, on a level of talent that we haven't seen in this city on the blue line ever in 50 years.
No.
So you don't mind having him be that smallish defenseman. But the guys surrounding him now certainly got a lot of size, and, you got the depth as well. Now that Soucy's out again for, 5 to 6 weeks with a broken knuckle, you can bring in Juleson, and Juleson's not a small guy either, and isn't afraid to play physical as well.
Yeah, and even an older guy like Ian Cole, you don't think of him as like an overly physical guy, but he is a physical presence out there. And even Tyler Myers. I think it might have been the Arizona game. He had a couple of big hits. It was the Toronto game actually against the Leafs. I remember he dumped somebody in the Leafs bench there, and I know Myers. We always talk about it was Yarncroc. That's right. Yeah. Everyone gives him a lot of shit, and I understand why at times, but he does. He is a good, serviceable NHL player. If he didn't make $6 million, I don't know if people would be as hard on Myers as they have been. But that physicality, that's what's going to happen come playoff times, right? This team, the last handful of games, outside of the Toronto game, which had 10 goals scored, they've been in 1-goal games, and they've been in very close physical games, and they've come away with at least a point in all those games, if not a victory. And I think that's just getting this team ready for the playoffs. Last night, JT Miller played 14 minutes. And I know some people might be like, he only played 14 minutes. He must have been getting crushed. No, I think Tocchet, the fourth line was cooking last night with Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, and Pius Suter.
Or are you calling that the fourth line now?
I would, well...
Are you on board with me that the Garland line with Bluger and Joshua is the second line?
Yes, I do think that. And I honestly, you can flip-flop between Oman, Hoglander, whether or not they're the fourth line. But if you look at production recently and ice time recently, I would say that Oman, I guess they called them the Swedish House Mafia line down in Abbotsford last year. That was when they had Linus Karlsson on the line. Yes. But they've got the balance all the way through. And I think last night being able to only give Miller 14 minutes of ice time, I think that's a good thing. You want your guys fresh heading into the playoffs. A lot of these teams that go on these tremendous win streaks, like we're seeing this right now with Edmonton. And don't get me wrong, I do not want to play Edmonton if we meet them in a playoff matchup. No. But they're putting so much effort into every game. You know what I mean? pedal to the metal, balls to the wall. And a lot of the time, by the time you get to the playoffs, these teams have completely run out of steam. And I like that the Canucks are kind of trying to manage their minutes where they can. We talked about it on the last episode. Ian Cole had a maintenance day. Pete as well, for all the people who aren't watching on YouTube. Pete's on another maintenance week. So he's not on the podcast. It's just you and I this week. But I like that. I like that, Talkett is very much aware, and he's got the foresight to look ahead and to try to, limit guys' minutes so they're 100% available and, to play at their peak performance come playoff time.
I'm just looking at the time on ice last night, and looks like amongst forwards, Dakota Joshua, 18 minutes and 10 seconds was, and then Pia Suter at 17 minutes and 11 seconds. I mean, Dakota Joshua, played the most of anybody by almost a minute. And it kind of goes to show.
I think there was a lot of PK minutes there, but still, I mean,
sure.
When has Dakota Joshua ever led this team in time on ice since he's been a Canuck? I don't think ever.
Exactly. And it kind of goes to show you where this team is now in comparison to last year, when you had Miller and Petey kind of being your number one PK, and it's not that way anymore. It's usually, now Bluger, I believe, took a couple of penalties last night, so his time on ice was a little bit lower because he wasn't out there for the PK for a couple of those because he was in the box. But usually they're the two that start. It's usually Teddy Bluger and Dakota Joshua as your 1-2. And then I believe next up it's Suter and Mikheyev as your next, because I think they're slowly starting to get Mikheyev back into that. I know a lot of people have been harder on him lately. Just, I mean, the production offensively hasn't been there, but I'm going to cut him some slack. You're coming back from a major injury like that, and I don't think that this season that you were going to really see the best of him. And the hope is that heading into whenever the off season begins, he'll get a full off season of training, healthy, hopefully. But I mean, I like the fact that they're spreading it around. Quinn Hughes was the high man, but played 22 minutes. He's not playing. I made a comment. I'm looking at LA, who's floundering right now. And you have Drew Doughty playing 28 minutes.
At his age?
Yeah, he's 34 years old. Is that a sustainable way for a team to win? And so for all the lauding that team got, and rightly so. I mean, they did accumulate a lot of prospects, a lot of great players. They're still leaning heavily on older players, especially on the blue line with Doughty. I mean, that guy. I mean, I get that he's probably more superhuman than most players, but still, playing 28 minutes a night at 34 years old when you've done it for as long as he has can't be easy. And not surprisingly, they're really, really struggling. So Tocchet had said last year, and there were criticisms about the way that he was managing ice times during that stretch towards the end. But it's really shown now that the roster has been reworked, and you got a little more balance, that the ice times now a lot more balanced. There are nights where the best players aren't playing the most minutes. And that's important, as you head down the stretch here, and it's an advantage the Canucks have, having built up such a lead as they have in the standings, is that you can have nights like that, and people were upset. And I mean, I wasn't all that happy with the way they played against Chicago. I thought especially in the second period, their level waned, but I mean, it wasn't a game where you needed to go balls out. It just wasn't. So as long as this isn't part of something we're going to see as they do start to play better teams, it's fine. Some nights you should be allowed to just, what, we're just going to do what we have to do to get the win. Let's try to get out of here healthy. Let's try to give other guys more minutes, and let's save it up for games where we're really going to need it, because they play a couple more games. St. Louis, who's, you never know what you're going to get from St. Louis, but you've got 2 winnable games here before the All-Star break. You play St. Louis, and then you play Columbus. Those are games that, on paper, and I mean, a lot of the times the paper's not worth much. Um, but those are games the Canucks should win. So if they get these 2 wins, you get 10 days off, and then you go into a tough stretch because you go to their last Eastern road trip, where you play teams like Boston and Carolina, amongst others. Washington, who isn't having that bad of a season either. Um,
The
so
Red Wings.
the Red Wings, yeah, again, another team that's
Yep.
right around that playoff bar and playing much better. So that's going to be a tough stretch for them. So why not get your rest now? Get other guys really involved because you're going to need them involved once you get off of that break and you head back east for that last road trip back east.
Yeah, I think managing, we've seen this in the NBA over the years, but like managing players and managing the amount of games that they play is becoming more and more of a thing. And like I've always said that Mike Gillis, I think his biggest impact on the Canucks was actually off the ice. It was the off the ice stuff that he was way ahead of the curve than so many sleep
The sleep
doctors.
doctor.
Exactly. And I do think he deserves a lot of credit. I mean, his trade record wasn't great. But that being said, he did make a couple of pretty big trades, Higgins, Lapierre, stuff like that. But yeah, I think right now this team, they're playing
Ehrhoff. There we
amazing.
go. Ehrhoff.
Ehrhoff,
There we go.
yes.
That would probably be considered his, just considering what they gave up.
Yeah.
How little they gave up to get a guy that ended up being a top 4 defenseman.
So here's a question for you, because I kind of saw somebody talking about this online. And let's take Hughes out of the equation. So let's take any season Hughes has ever had as a Canuck out of the equation, because obviously he's the best we've ever seen. Where would you put Hronek's season this year in the pantheon of all-time Canuck defensemen? Now, I know Doug Lidster had 65 points one year. That was, the 90s, 80s, Kearns as well. But like, if you were to take Hughes out of it, Hronek is what, having a top 4, top 5 year? I mean, I think Ehrhoff had just over 54 points that one year with the Canucks, if I remember correctly.
Well, I can look that up quickly. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. And it's one that I didn't see that, and it's one that I haven't really thought about. Wow, because I mean the Canucks in their history have not been blessed with a lot of. He had so Ehrhoff in 2010-11 had 14 goals, 36 points 14 goals, 36 assists for 50 points. So the crazy thing is,
that's his benchmark,
and he did that in 79 games. And you look at Quinn Hughes right now, and I mean he's already surpassed that. And he's played 47. I mean, that's absolutely insane. And I
no,
know
Philip Hronek.
we're not comparing those two, obviously, but I'm just thinking. I mean,
no,
the fact that he's already passed that season, that was considered a really good season for a Canuck defenseman. So Hronek right now, 39.
So
points.
Hronek, 36 points in 47 games.
I mean, that's the thing. The Canucks have not been blessed with a lot of really good offensive defensemen.
No.
Throughout their history.
But even Hronek's two-way play. Jovanovski.
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
But even Hronek's two-way play has been good, right? I mean, Adrian Aucoin, didn't Aucoin have a 20-goal season for the Canucks?
See, now you're making me look all this stuff.
I know. Sorry, that's usually Pete's job.
Oh, no, that's
I swear Adrian Aucoin had a 20-goal season as a defenseman for the Canucks.
Yeah, he did.
Pretty close. He did, right?
No, he had a 23-goal season.
Wow.
23. I mean, he definitely won the Cy Young Award for defenseman that year. 23 goals, 11 assists.
11 assists. Yeah.
That was a bad year for the Canucks. That was 98-99. So that was in and around the Mike Keenan era.
Messier.
Yeah. That would have been in and around the time where that team went from Mike Keenan to Mark Crawford. And in fact, I'm looking at it right now. That's exactly what happened. Mike Keenan started the year. Mark Crawford ended the year. I'm trying to think of who I could think here, like of Canucks defensemen. I mean, Ed Jovanovski.
Jovo's
Joe.
one that comes up.
So Jovo had a couple of good. He had 48 points, 17 goals, 48 points in 2001, 2002, and then 6 goals, 40 assists, which would probably be that year. Would probably be his best year as a Canuck because that was probably one of the Canucks' better years. Um, and he finished that year seventh or sixth in Norris Trophy voting. Um, yeah, and he was a plus 19. So yeah, I mean, it like honest to God, I mean, you could make the argument that Hronek is having the second best season a Canuck defenseman has ever
Yeah,
had.
exactly. I mean, he's a plus 33 right now, Hronek on the season. I know people argue what the validity of plus minus, but
Validity.
a validity, that's the word I was
But
looking for. Thank you.
see, you're still validity. Come on, say it for me, Doug. Validity.
Validity. I can't say it. I can't
No,
say
it's
it.
okay. It's okay. I get what you're throwing out. I mean, if you like, I mean, and then you look at Ehrhoff's year in 2009 2010, where he didn't put up as many points as he did at his 50 point, still put up decent 14 and 30, and he was a plus 36 that year.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean,
There's an argument to be made,
yeah,
right?
there's definitely an argument to be made. I mean, again, different standards. You can go
For
look
sure.
back at years that a guy like maybe Matthias Oland had, or maybe Alex Edler earlier in his career, where he had some
Sammy
decent
Sallow.
season. Sammy Sallow as
Sammy
well.
Salloh when he was
When he was
healthy,
healthy,
right?
and that was the big problem with Sammy Sallow is that you could argue that if he stayed healthy, he's until Hughes showed up, was the best defenseman this team has ever that his team's ever had. So Edler had some good years, 49 points and 11-12, and 42 points and 09-10. So he had some good years, but his plus minus is never. And again, that's not a stat you necessarily look at, but
Yeah.
still, it's still something that you may take into account to an extent. So it's definitely an interesting question, and it's one that I think that if Hronek continues the way he's going, he'll probably will go down as the second best season any Canuck defenseman has ever had in a season with so many crazy things that are happening.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, the other one is like if you look at Thatcher Demko, before this year, he had 3 career shutouts. Now he's got 5 on the season. And I would assume it's him and Hellebuck are 1-2, I think, in
Yeah,
Vezina trophy
yeah.
running right now. But everything seems to be clicking on and off the ice with this team. And I just think right now we're seeing a couple of record breaking seasons. Like obviously Quinn Hughes is going to break his own record for most points by a Canucks defenseman. I don't know if anyone will eclipse the 112 point season that I believe it was Henrik Sedin had. Was it 2010, 2011? I believe it was. But I think
I think
Petey's going
that
to be close.
was that a was that I think that might have been was that own. Let's find out.
Maybe it was 09, 010. I don't know. But it's going to be close, right? Like I think
Yeah,
I
because
think
I think that was the year that Daniel broke his foot, and Henrik was kind of
that's right.
left to run on his own. So yeah, that was 2009, 2010.
Okay. And it was
Now,
112 points, right?
I mean, 112 points. It'll be interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
can Hughes possibly come close to breaking Daniel or Henrik Sedin's 83 assists in a season?
Ooh.
I mean, it's possible with where he's at right now. I mean, he's on pace for it to be close. Um, but you look at that to me that the 5 shutouts for Thatcher Demko when he only had 3 in his throughout his entire career leading into this season. I had an interesting discussion, and everybody I've said the biggest thing that's come is coaching, and
Yeah.
because I firmly believe that um, without it, you could have made all these roster moves if you wanted to. They're not having the same success. Um,
No.
Mainly because it's not just you overhaul the defense. Like, and to me, that and as important as that was, is bringing in all those faces in and what they've done. It's as much about what the forwards do as anything, and a lot of the forwards are holdovers from the previous coaching staff. It's getting them to buy in, and that to me, that's what it always was. You know, I think the defensemen in this city is as much as the changes were needed and they needed to upgrade. I think in throughout the years they got a raw deal from this fan base who didn't understand what they were watching, who didn't understand that it was as much that there was i- as much, if not way more, about what the forwards weren't doing
Yep.
than what the defensemen were doing. It was just too often that the defensemen over the last few years were forced to defend on an island by themselves, 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, odd man rushes, like, turnovers, that force them to be flat-footed. You don't see that anymore because the forwards are managing the puck. They're, oh, hey, Pete's here. Uh
Hey.
I'll just finish what I'm saying here and then we'll get to Pete. But, having the forwards do their job properly is as much to me, it's the biggest reason why this team is doing better defensively. This is a five-man unit. This isn't defensemen carrying the load. And I mean, look no further than the way Tyler Myers is playing this year.
Yep.
Um, I mean, it helps. It really does help when your forwards and your defense that are on the ice at any given time are all on the same page playing as a unit. And the benefactor is Thatcher Demko, who, has been great, but he hasn't had to be as great as he was forced to be when this team was horrible defensively. Like just horrendous. Hey Pete.
Hi, guys.
What's going
Hey,
on?
Tyler Myers against the Leafs. I saw highlights of that. Obviously, I haven't watched games, but Tyler Myers against the Leafs, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I mean,
mentioned
yeah.
him putting Yarncroke in the bench.
That was good to see. And then almost knocking John
taking,
Tavares
yeah.
into the IR there.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's it going?
Where are you? Where are you, buddy?
I'm in La Paz, Bolivia right now.
Oh my
Cool.
God. Is this not, are you near where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid
Oh.
were famously
Filmed?
allegedly killed?
Yeah, I don't know. I also know Che Guevara is buried somewhere here. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look into that.
You should go to the town because the town does exist. It is a real town. Whether the story is true that the two of them were killed when they went down to Bolivia, or if Butch Cassidy got away and lived till he was in his 80s somewhere in the States, who the hell knows?
Reminds me of
unlimited-
DB Cooper's story almost.
Yeah,
no
yeah.
kidding, man. No
What
kidding.
it is one of those conspiracies that no one, or one of those mysteries that no one has an answer to.
Yeah, just like they say, Che Guevara is buried here, but they cut off his hands and they're buried in different places. So I don't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what they said.
So-
What's going on,
Canucks.
Pete, man?
What's that?
I said, what's going on, dude? Have you been
Well-
keeping tabs on, the last few games? You mentioned the Leafs game.
Dude, I keep tabs. Internet is kind of like sketchy depending where I am. So some places I've stayed, I'm not really able to watch videos. But then when I get to the next one, I'm able to kind of get caught up. So I watch all the condensed versions of the games, and of course I see what's going on Twitter and stay all up with all that as best as I can. But I haven't been able to actually watch a full game, but I kind of got the gist of what's going on and seen all the highlights. So yeah,
Well,
still following
keep
the team
winning.
very closely down here.
What's now La Paz? Is it are there many English speakers down there, or is it mostly Spanish?
It's mostly Spanish, yeah. So
How's your Spanish?
I speak very basic Spanish,
Okay.
and it gets me by, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can along the way. So it's actually gotten a little better, but I'm very basic Spanish speaker. But man, if I didn't have that, it'd be a tough trip so far.
What that translate to is Spanglish. Pete,
Yeah,
Pete
pretty
is fluent
much.
in Spanglish.
Pigeon Spanglish. That is me right now. I saw a couple of people wearing Canucks shirts when I was in Lima, and I haven't really
No
seen any
shit.
Canucks stuff since then. But I
You
watched.
did you take a photo of that?
No, it was like right when I came out of the airport. But I did find I did like the most un-Peruvian thing a couple days in Cusco. I went to this Irish bar to watch the football all day because that was just what I felt like doing. And I was turns out there was a couple from Vancouver Island behind me, and started chatting with them, and so we had some Canucks chatter in a
Were there
bar,
Nice.
Irish
were there a
bar in
lot of
Cusco.
were there a lot of people watching football in Cusco?
There was maybe a dozen or so of us. It was pretty much all Canadians and Americans. It just
And you're
kind of,
talking NFL, right? You're not talking soccer.
It
Yeah.
was the Sunday slate of games, the Lions and the Chiefs games.
Uh,
I just
Nice, man.
felt like a very untouristy day that day. I was just like,
hey,
fuck it, I
whatever.
want to watch football.
Sometimes you feel like doing untouristy things, right? You
Yeah.
got to mix it up.
And I'm hitting a very busy stretch of the trip right now. I got a stretch with 3 night buses in 5 days, and just there's a lot going on. So I was just like,
Well,
I'm just gonna
perfect
do
perfect
that.
timing. Canucks play 2 and then they're off for 10. So,
Yeah, I know.
you have
When I was planning this trip, I did take that into consideration as well. And then Doug's hooked me up with a bunch of tickets for when I get back, so I'll be able to go to, I think, another half dozen games or so this year,
good.
and hopefully we can get some meetups as well and watch some games, because man, it's a fun year. I mean, the Chicago game, from what I caught of it, didn't look the most exciting after the first half of the first period or so,
No.
but still a win and a
Yeah.
shutout.
I mean,
And,
what I said was, you're going to go through an 82 game stretch, and sometimes you have to, manage your energy a little bit. And I'm not going to say that that's necessarily what they did, but they got up 2-0 and they did what they felt that they had to do, and you know, the minutes were strung out throughout the lineup. Dakota Joshua, with 11, I think, led led the Canucks in ice time from the forwards, and then Quinn Hughes played 22, and so you're able to string out those minutes, and you get the win, and that's really all that matters.
so
This team is this, in my opinion, this team has begun to get the benefit of the doubt for me, that they can have a game like that where they win and they don't necessarily look that good, and that they can follow that up with a much better performance. I'd be much more nervous as if I had seen them do that and it leads to something, excuse me, far worse. So,
yeah.
I'm not, it's not something to be concerned about.
So, what this kind of reminds me of a little bit is back around 2010, 2011, when we had the President's Trophy seasons, and you just got used to winning. And I remember even you and I, Doug, we would be after some games, we'd be like, yeah, they won, but that was a team, they should have won by 4, and they only won 3-2, but they still won. And it felt like that was kind of one of those games against Chicago. It's one of those games where you're like, yeah, they won, but they're kind of playing an AHL team. They should have put up 5, but the end of the day, a win is a win. And after this break, the Canucks have some really tough games coming up. There's not a lot of these.
Just talking about that before you jumped on.
Yeah, you got a bunch of the Jets 3 times, the Knights 3 times, the Bruins a couple times. And then, add in that is how active are they going to be at the deadline. I mean, February is going to be a hell of an interesting month.
Yeah. What I like about this team is the different ways they find ways to win, right?
Yeah.
They can win a 1-0 game against Buffalo, which ended up becoming pretty physical. Even that 2-1 game against the Coyotes, which was a physical game, then you can have a game like where the Leafs, where you give up 3 goals, where the Leafs tie it, but you don't break, you bend, but you don't break. You come back, you put another goal up, the Leafs tie it again, and then you just kind of finish them off with the power play with the 2 goals there. And they're finding different ways to win. It's not like they're blowing teams out or they're losing. And I think that's really exciting heading into the playoffs, is they can win those close, tight, physical games. Because that was the other thing Brendan and I were talking about, was there've been a lot more physicality to the last handful of games. And I think that's great to see. And the Canucks are answering the bell. You're seeing guys like Zadorov getting more physical. JT Miller had a fight.
Tyler Myers.
Dakota Joshua, Tyler Myers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's nice to see that. And, it's one of those things that it's the different ways this team is winning. And even when they do give up a 2 or 3 goal lead, they don't completely collapse like they have the last handful of years.
I know I'm kind of interrupting with your guys' conversation, but have you guys talked about the trade deadline at all? Or if the Canucks should be buyers or sellers, or not sellers, obviously, sorry, but should they be kind of pushing in some chips a bit more? Because I've kind of shifted my mentality to thinking that, I think this year and this team, I'm okay with mortgaging a little bit of the future to round out this team a little bit, maybe get another scoring forward and another depth defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, to an extent, you want, you'd be okay with it, obviously within reason. You don't want them to mortgage everything, but if the right player comes up, and the one thing that this management group has gained is the trust of this fan base that um that they can identify a player that can come in, and and Jim Rutherford brought in, I guess we'll discuss his extension in a minute here, but discuss, it's not just the right player, but it's the right fit in the locker room. And so the fact that and most management groups are going to be cognizant of that, probably more than others. I don't, that's one thing about the previous management group that I kind of wondered if they were kind of cognizant of those sorts of things with the amount of players that ended up wanting out. But they're definitely cognizant of that fact that it's not just the right player, but it's the right person to fit into that locker room. So yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see what they do. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. As Alvin said, he owes it to the players. Now he owes it in multiple ways. That you can look at that two ways. You can look at it as he owes it that he has to add, or he owes it as in he owes it to these players to keep it the way it is and to give them a shot. So yeah, I mean, as Rutherford said at his presser, he's not going to be taking anything off of this roster within, with the exception of maybe one or two players, and I think we all know who those players are. But yeah, it's going to be exciting. The next month's going to be exciting, and as you said, Pete, it feels a lot like 2010 and 2011 in that you just go into the games feeling confident
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
that they're going to find a way to, maybe if not win every game, get points or get a point, and it's a nice feeling to have, and it goes to the coaching and the players and the buy-in and the way they manage games. They're never out of a game. They're always in it, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, that was the stat I brought up earlier before you were on, Pete, that in the last 21 games, the Canucks have only faced a multi-goal deficit in one of those games. And that was
Yeah.
against
Wow.
that was against Philadelphia coming out of the Christmas break. So
Yeah.
it's really a staggering season we're watching, and one that none of us expected to this extent. Even if we kind of thought that with coaching they could be better, none of us thought they were going to be this good. So it's just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that they should be active in the trade market. I'm not necessarily sold on some of the high price rentals that are out there, like a Gensel. You're not going to be able to re-sign him. Apparently, he's allegedly already turned down a contract upwards of 8 million per season from the Penguins.
Wow.
So you can tell he's
Jeez.
wanting, I would assume 8.5 at least.
That's
I'm
more
not as
than
high on.
JT.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the more years that go by and with the cap going up, I think the JT Miller contract's actually going to look like a bargain. And, if it's not already looking like a bargain. But
Yeah.
I do think they should be active, because one of the things that people are already looking ahead to is there's a lot of guys who are on 1-year deals. You got
Yeah.
Teddy Bluger, who's a UFA at the end of the year. He's going to be, I think, in high demand for a lot of teams. Dakota Joshua, who is making league minimum, I think he's going to be one of the bigger unrestricted free agents out there. I think a team like, I could see the Toronto Maple Leafs manipulating the cap and putting what's his name on LTIR, and then using that $3.5 million they signed him to sign Dakota Joshua. Who's the guy? Played in Minnesota, played for the Rangers.
Ryan Reeves.
Ryan Reeves. I could see them putting him on LTIR and throwing Joshua $3.5 million.
What do they call it? Robida Island.
Robida Island. That's it. So I do think this group that we have, this might be the 1 year where everything's clicking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would prefer to add guys that have term. Like, one of the names I've thrown out there, and I don't know if this guy's available. I don't think he's like a massive get, but a Colton Sissons. He's a local kid. He's still relatively young. He's had success in the playoffs. He's a good two-way forward, and he signed until 2025. So if you can't resign Bluger in the offseason, you've got a guy who can come in and be that stopgap. And obviously Atu Rati, whether or not he takes a leap heading into next year and can maybe make the team, I don't know. But I agree. I do think something special is happening with this team. And if you can add, and you trade the first round pick, whatever. I don't want to trade Wielander. I don't want to trade Briskevich, and I don't want to trade EP or DPD either. I don't want to trade any of the defensemen. Lekaramaki, I'm not as high on as a lot of people. I know the guy can absolutely wire the puck. He seems like a guy who I don't know if the game gets really, really physical, if he's a guy that's going to be able to rise to the occasion. Just from what I've seen him at the World Juniors, that's just my opinion. By no means am I a fucking scout or anything professional, but that's my thought on him. And I do think you could sell high on him. But yeah, the rental market is what kind of scares me.
Yeah, also Sam Lafferty, Ian Cole, I think Casey Smith. You got a few guys there. Remember as well, the Canucks first this year. That's going to be a later first. So that's it's not going to be like
a second.
A top. Yeah, it could be as far down. Who knows how far down, depending on the playoffs. Karamaki, I don't feel like they're going to trade him unless something knocks their socks off. But I agree with you about players with term. I don't know. Like, I like Colton Sissons. He's a guy who's always played the Canucks hard. I don't know if he's quite what they need for this team. Maybe for next year's team he is. But I think for this team, I think they need someone with a little more scoring. But I do think there's going to be some names that come out that kind of like the Hronek deal that we just, none of us in Vancouver thought Hronek was coming. I know the Canucks have scouts at the Ottawa-Montreal game today, and you can read into that however you want with those two teams.
Sean Monahan.
Giroux's the big one. Monahan, yeah.
Does Giroux have a no movement, or is he?
He does. Yeah,
he does. I thought he did with that deal, but I could see him possibly waiving that. Monahan, of course, yeah. I mean, that's a great trade. Montreal, I mean, they got a first rounder for taking him, right? So I mean, they're gonna be loving to flip him again. But I mean, yeah, I still think there's gonna be a name that comes out of nowhere.
I think
it'll be a player with term as well. I don't like the rental market, and I don't want to give up, whatever some of the offers of what it's taken to get a Gensel. Yeah, and a lot of the time those deals don't work out, right? Like, you get a guy with term. I always feel like there's a bit more buy-in towards it. I mean, look at Hronek and the way he's kind of fit in here. A rental, yeah, I don't know. Unless it's for maybe a depth, like a 5 or 6 defenseman, but I don't think that's going to solve the issues up front. I think it's going to be a name that we didn't see.
The other name that I've been hearing people talk about is Casey Middlestat out of Buffalo, because he's playing well and he's RFA.
Yeah.
I know.
Why would they trade
but
him? I just can't see it. Why?
But I think Buffalo's at that point. It's shit or get off the pot, right? They've collected all these prospects. I was actually listening to Halford and Bruff this morning, and they had a guy on from Buffalo to talk about the Bills, the wide right, unfortunately, again, and just the Sabres as a whole. And he said the last hockey trade, and he doesn't count the Eichel trade as a hockey trade because it wasn't. Eichel wanted out. You were getting pieces back. That's not a real hockey trade. This Buffalo reporter said the last hockey trade where the Buffalo Sabres traded, a good player who just wasn't doing well in their team for another good player that wasn't doing well on that team or wasn't a fit, was Cassian for Hodson. That was the last hockey trade he thinks the Buffalo Sabres have made. And that was 12 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Shout
out to Cody Hodson as well.
Yeah, try to make
a comeback.
I just look at Middlestat right now. He's nearly a point a game player. I mean, he's playing and you've finally gotten to the point where he's 25 now, so he's not young, but you're getting to the point now where he's actually developed into something. And now was the time. I've looked at their issues much the same way I looked at the Canucks issues from a few years ago. Is they just need a coach to go in there and get them all playing on the same page. The sum of we said it last year watching the Canucks. The sum of the parts isn't adding up to what it should add up to. And they need a voice in there to get them all playing on the same page. Now, luckily the Canucks, found a coach capable of doing that. It just feels like that's what Buffalo means. There's way too much talent there, way too much. So, I mean, do I see them try? I mean, I guess they could, but I just what are the Canucks? What can the Canucks offer in return for a Casey Middlestat that they're going to want? because I'm assuming they're not going to be looking for futures. They've been doing that for the last 15 years. So they'd be looking for something to win now. Is Kuzmenko that guy? I mean, I don't doubt it. I wouldn't put money on that. So who else is there that they could take off of this roster, or who they could take from Abbotsford or in the prospect pool that they felt that could help them in the near future? And I don't necessarily see anybody. And that's the problem. And I know this has been brought up on in other places. A lot of the teams that are looking to make that have players that may be on the trade block, they're not looking for futures. Ottawa for Claude Giroux, I doubt they're looking for futures. They're looking for something to get that team winning and winning soon. Um, so and that's the thing. It's finding that right player and then finding that right trade partner that wants what you're willing to give up. Are the Canucks willing to give up a Hoglander? There'd be a guy that you might be able to get
No.
but that's a guy that teams are gonna, given what I've just said, that a lot of teams are looking to win now. That's
Yeah.
a player that they might be willing that they may be willing to listen to. And the problem is, are the Canucks willing to listen to that, considering how he's played?
Yeah, you
And
don't trade
Dollywall
Hoggy.
said the Flames are really high on Hoglander, and if they were to make a trade for Tanev and or Lindholm, Hoglander would be one of the pieces they'd want going back.
Lindholm, maybe. I would not be trading Hoglander for Chris Tanev. I'm sorry.
I agree.
You're not trading
No.
a 23-year-old, or I don't even know, is he 23, 23, I think. You're not trading a guy that young for a 34-year-old who barely can get through an 82 game schedule, let alone playoffs. And that's no offense to Chris Tanev. We love him here in Vancouver. He was a warrior here, but that warrior mentality has left some wear on those tires. The tread is becoming less and less effective. So, again, like, if you're going to be trading a guy like Niels Hoglander now, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm wholly against it, but it has to make sense. It has to be a player that you're getting back that is not too old, and can help you not just in this season, but beyond this season. I'm very hesitant of any rentals. I don't like that idea.
Yeah, and
I
I don't
think the
trade.
Middlestat
I don't
thing-
trade Hoglander by myself.
Well, I
But
think
it-
with the
but-
Middlestat
well,
thing,
What's that?
I think with the Middlestat thing, he's RFA, and he's going to get a pretty hefty raise, and I don't think Buffalo can afford to keep him. I mean, they've got Jeff Skinner at $9 million, Tage Thompson just over 7, Alex Tuck 4.75. They've got Dylan Cousins making 7 million. They've got Rasmus Dahlin making 6 million. Samuelson, their defenseman, is making 4.28 million. Like, I think they're going to be priced out of Middlestat, and that's why I think he's a guy that, they might be able to. I agree with you. He's finally developed, like you said, Brendan, but I think that's why he's a piece that maybe could shake loose. And if, you could trade Hoglander and maybe an additional thing to acquire a guy like Middlestat, who could be potentially your second line center of the future, and you keep the Lotto line together, maybe that makes sense. But again, do the Canucks have the money to re-sign him to a long-term contract? I don't think they do.
Don't know. Not right now, especially with a couple of guys in the pecking order ahead of them that they got to deal with right now. So
yeah,
I mean, just looking at that Buffalo lineup, maybe a Dylan Cousins.
Yeah, he's making 7 million though, right? Like, I don't see.
He's making his current. Yeah. So I mean, so if you say trade a Hoglander and then add a Kuzmenko to that to make that work,
Gotcha.
I mean, and again, I'm just throwing names out. Like, again, I tend to agree with Pete that it may in the end be somebody that we have no idea. Did anybody see Philip Hronek coming? No. When they made that trade for Philip Hronek, it was straight up stunned throughout this market and actually throughout the NHL, because no one knew that was coming. So it could very well end up being that that's what happens here. It's just there's a trade that we just didn't know. And it's possible that we could see somebody get traded before then that leads to it, much in the same way as, we saw Bo Horvat get dealt. You might see a trade that leads to another trade, which seems to be an MO of Patrick Allvin in this management group.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to take off. There's like some sort of fiesta or drunkards on the corner. I want to go peek my head out the window and see what's going on. But great chatting with you. I'm on team Don't Trade Hoglander. I think this guy could really be a piece.
I agree. I agree.
So,
I don't disagree with that.
You guys are scaring me away with all this Hoglander trade chatter. But I'm going to go see what these hombres on the corner are up to here.
Well, go have a cerveza for me.
I'll hopefully get to pop on again here.
Yeah. Have some mezcal.
Canucks from Bolivia.
Cerveza, por favor.
You know it. CC. Hasta luego.
I guess we should probably get into the Jim Rutherford extension. He is extended for, I believe, 3 more years. Rutherford's 74 years old, so he's extended until he's going to be the age 77. What are your thoughts on the extension?
Well, first of all, can you hear me? Am I still there?
I can hear you. It looks like you've frozen, but I can definitely hear you.
I'm all right. So as long as you can hear me, you can. Whoever's watching this YouTube channel can see my shit-eating grin on my face. I mean, how could you not? How could you not be anything other than happy about it? Because he earned it. In the last 365 days, what this team was compared to what it is now, it is night and day. And as I told people last year when things got into the darkest, that you got to let this management group get things in place the way they want it before you can truly judge what they are.
Oh, it looks like we might have a little bit of an issue. And we're back. I paused the recording, so there'll be a little bit of a thing there. But yes, you're back. Perfect.
Where did you lose me?
I think you were just talking about the Rutherford extension and how he earned it.
Yeah, I mean, so he turned 74 or he's 74 now, and he's going to be 77, 78 by the time this extension ends. And it's clear to me that he's sticking around because he feels that there's a path to get this team a Stanley Cup. Yeah. Within whether hey, I mean, by some crazy circumstance that happens to be this year, and I'm still looking at it that way. It'd be some sort of a season to go from where they were to a Stanley Cup champion like that. That'd be crazy. So I'm still looking at, as much as it's possible, and certainly a lot more possible than we thought coming into the season, I'm still looking at it as sort of pie in the sky. But he clearly feels that there's a way to get this team a Stanley Cup and this city a Stanley Cup, so he can ride off into the sunset. Arguably one of the greatest administrators, one of the greatest, presidents, general managers, whatever you want to, in the history of
hockey
the NHL.
Executive.
Oh, there
hockey
you go.
Executive.
Great. That executives is right. It's the word I was looking for. One of the greatest executives in the history of the sport. To do it with 3 different teams, and not just to do it with 3 different teams, but to do it with a Canadian team, and a Canadian team that has never done it before. I think obviously he's a competitive guy. You hear that every time that he does an interview. You feel the energy, even at his age, that he wants it, and he wants it bad. And what better way to end a pretty storied career as an executive than to bring a Stanley Cup to Vancouver? And I really do think he feels that that's within the realm of possibility, or I don't know if he would have stuck around for 3 more years.
Yeah, and I like what he said at the press conference. When he was asked about his age, he's like, "What else am I going to do? I've been in the game of hockey for 50 plus years. What else am I going to do?" Clearly, he still has the passion. He still wants to work. He still loves getting up every day and watching games and, trying to build a team and looking to the future. And I agree. Like, I don't know if there's ever, I'm sure there's at least one president, general manager, hockey exec who's won a Stanley Cup in 2 different places. There's got to be at least 1 or 2 of them out there. There's not many that come to mind.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, Keenan won with the Rangers, but that's it, right? He didn't win with Chicago, obviously. Clearly didn't win in Vancouver.
And he was a
Lou
coach,
Lamoriello,
and he wasn't a general manager.
yeah, like Bowman. Bowman was more of like an assistant or like a consultant when Scotty. He didn't really. I don't think he was ever a full on a GM anywhere. I'm sure he had maybe GM duties some of the times he was in Detroit and Montreal and whatnot, but. Being able to bring a Stanley Cup to Vancouver, but also like Carolina, to bring their first Stanley Cup. And I know they were a relatively new franchise when they won that cup back, and I think it was 03 or 05, whenever it was. But to bring their first cup, to that city and to, again, I'm not putting the horse before the cart here, but this does look like a really special season. I agree. And if Demko, we always love to say bubble Demko, but if Demko come playoff time can, absolutely, stand on his head, this team, I think, has all the pieces in place, injuries excluded, obviously, because, injuries can derail any team. I think that's why the Golden Knights last year, were such a steamroll through the playoffs. They had no injuries. This year, there's a lot of injuries that have caught up to them, and that's why they've been struggling a little bit as of late. But last year, they were extremely healthy. And you go back to the 2010, 2011 series against the Bruins. One of the big issues the Canucks lost that series is because injuries just started piling up. Dan Hamhuis got hurt. Mason Raymond got hurt. Kessler apparently, was playing, pretty much on one
sports hernia
or
Yeah, it was
something
a
like
hip.
that.
Yeah, it was a hip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, because he'd done so much in that Nashville series, to, dragged the Canucks against Nashville there. And so it happens. But this year, outside of Carson Soucy, who just can't stay healthy for a long period of time, which sucks, this team's been relatively healthy. And I think, it's definitely well-deserved. I also think this prevents Aquilini from tinkering or meddling, which I think he's been accused of before. You've locked Jim Benning up for 3 more years. So we at least have 3 more years of not having to worry about Aquilini meddling with the team. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, to Aquilini's, if you want to call it crap, at least he seems to have learned whatever lesson that has needed to be learned. And I do think it also does help. And I think, if you look back at the previous regime, the lack of experience throughout from the president who was there at one point in time to the GM to the coaches that were there, they were all first timers. And Jim Rutherford's not a first timer. You may have a first time GM in there, but the guy at the top isn't. So he's able to oversee things, and he understands what needs to be done, and he understands, um, you know, how to keep an owner at arm's length, but keep him involved as well. Because I don't think it would be right to say that Aquilini isn't involved at all. I think every owner is involved to an extent, and I think he's still involved to an extent. But if you have a good voice at the top that it can explain what's happening and explain why it's happening, it does make it easier for you to keep that owner away. More so than if you have guys that maybe lack that experience and that understanding of how to keep that owner at bay. Because I think in a lot of ways, like you look at what's going on, and like probably my best example in pro sports right now is Carolina, the Carolina Panthers, and their owner David Tepin, who's just looks like an absolute, like, how the fuck that guy became a billionaire, I have no idea. Because when it comes to running a sports franchise, he is a complete moron. But you see that a lot. You see that a lot
Yeah.
throughout. So yeah, the importance of having that guy at the top who is a strong voice, a veteran voice who's done it all in this league it's important, and that certainly shouldn't be understated.
No, and I think the leadership starts from the top and it trickles down. And he surrounded himself with really good hockey people. And
Yeah,
I think now that
smart.
he and his position is secured, hopefully we'll see an Alvin extension and some of the other smart hockey people like Cami Granado. Hopefully she sticks around now that Rutherford's in place there. But
You'd
yeah, man,
expect, yeah, you'd expect at some point that there's a chance that somebody might go. There were rumors going in even after the craziness that was last year. I mean, I saw, and I don't know if it ended up happening, but Emily Castonguay getting a look-see to be the president in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And she seems like an extremely smart individual, and you'd assume, like, at some point when a team's doing well, teams are going to come knocking at your door to look to talk to the people that have helped put this together. And certainly the Canucks have, with Granato and Castonguay, I mean, have two bright people there that might end up looking to want to move up and then further their careers. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And I suppose the next step up for both of them would be, a general manager's position.
I mean, you see that you're seeing this right now in the NFL with all the coordinators, of high powered defenses or high octane offenses moving or interviewing for coaching jobs. And some of the teams that are still in the playoffs, they're coaching their coordinators waiting till the playoffs are over to interview for certain jobs. So it makes sense when a team is successful that, obviously there's a lot that goes into it, but the bright people and the smart people at the very top generally, are considered one of the main reasons why they have been
Sure.
successful, and they become hot commodities, like you said.
And just to give, Aquilini, we dump on him a lot, but I do give him credit because once again, he has done, and you can argue it's far too late for it, but regardless, he's still doing it and he's still footing the bill for it. Expanding the hockey ops department, um, you know, bringing in more voices. Whereas, it seemed once Trevor Linden left, it was Jim Benning and Jim Benning alone. There didn't seem to be a lot of that important discussion that needs to be had, and so to have as many voices they have, as many intelligent voices as they have, it certainly does make you feel a lot more comfortable about what this team and the decision making that's going into what's happening right now, which is one of the best seasons this team has ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we go into the free pour here, Brendan?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to start us off, and I want to talk about another hockey team, actually. And I want to talk about Patrick Waugh being hired for the New York Islanders. And I was always a Waugh fan growing up. He was iconic goalie for the Montreal Canadiens. One of the biggest competitors, I think, in hockey history. The guy is a competitor. He is not afraid to voice his opinion. Had one of the best comebacks in all of sports to Jeremy Hronek when he said his 2 Stanley Cup rings were plugging his ears. But he was hired by the New York Islanders. Lou Lamoriello fired their coach and Lane Lambert and said he had one guy on his list, and it was Patrick Waugh. And he pulled the trigger, and Waugh is now the coach of the New York Islanders. And Waugh had success, won a Jack Adams when he was coaching the Colorado Avalanche, but I think he wanted a little bit more say in the team roster and certain roster decisions that were made. And I don't know if at that time him and Sakic saw eye to eye, and Waugh kind of walked away and just quit essentially. But if you think of even that short amount of time that Waugh was coaching in the league, what an impact he made. We see this regularly now where teams will pull their goalie being down a goal with 3-4 minutes left in a game. And that started with Patrick Waugh, really, pulling the goalie that early. There were some games when Waugh was coaching Colorado, he would pull the goalie with 5 minutes left. And I think, that just goes to show not only does this guy got a big set of balls on him, but, it just changed the game. He's like, hey, we play to win the game. I'm going to try to give my team every advantage to win this game. And if having an extra forward on gives us that advantage, I'm going to do it. And you saw every coach now, they maybe not wait till 5 minutes or 6 minutes, but, 4 minutes left in the game, 3 minutes left in the game, teams are pulling their goalie. And that was started by Patrick Waugh. And I think things got a lot more entertaining for the league, having him back in the league coaching. He is a character, and congratulations to Patrick Waugh.
I think they're losing right now, sadly, to Vegas. I think it was last time I checked, it was 3-1 as they headed into the third period. Mine, now you listen to the show well enough. Brendan likes death, apparently, because somebody seems to die. So if you're watching on YouTube, the photo that I have up is one of the greatest movies of all time, that being In the Heat of the Night, starring Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger. If you never watched it, you know, watch it because it's an amazing movie. And so, why am I bringing up this movie? That's because the great Canadian film director Norman Jewison, who directed that film, just passed away at the age of 97. Um, Probably, arguably, no, probably not arguably, probably is the greatest Canadian director ever. In the Heat of the Night, Moonstruck, another amazing movie. Just an amazing director. Uh, he lived a great life. As he said, he marched with Martin Luther King. He flew in planes with Marlon Brando. He led an amazing life, and a life that most Canadians don't live. So it's always great when you have a Canadian go down south and do great things, and do Canadians proud, and certainly Norman did it. Led a great life, 97 years old, and rest in peace.
All right, that wraps it out. Up episode 161, season 5, episode 15 or 16, pardon me, I believe it is. Brendan, another episode. We had a surprise guest. Pete jumped on, said hi. That was great.
Let's
Man, I'm looking forward to it.
let's hope when we get back here next week, we got 2 more Canuck victories, and they're on to the All-Star game, and they get their days off. They get to recharge their batteries. Hey, they played a ton of hockey, as much hockey as any team in the NHL at this point. And so they deserve some time off to recharge their batteries. And when we get back, obviously we'll enter the most important part, that this stretch drive. And you know what? Just to be clear, the Canucks they're tied for playing the most amount of games in the NHL right now. So, yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and let's just hope that the fun keeps on going.
Quick question for you. 4 teams left in the playoffs of the NFL. Who you got? You got the Chiefs and the Ravens, and you got the 49ers and the Lions. Who do you have coming out of each side?
I have the Ravens playing the 49ers in a
Me too.
rematch of I don't remember what Super Bowl that was. Super Bowl 50, maybe? That might have been Super Bowl 50, actually. Or no,
It was
47.
Harbaugh versus Harbaugh.
Harbaugh versus Harbaugh. Yeah, I think that Ravens defense is it's going to be able to do enough to shut down what Mahomes does well. That defense is good. I mean, I watched my Seahawks play against them. They're about as good as any defense. They're able to get pressure with a 4-man front, which most teams aren't capable of doing. And they run the ball about as well as anybody. But I'm not, obviously, don't count out the Chiefs. Steve Spagnuolo, a great defensive coordinator, done an amazing job this year, and you got Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. But I still think that it will be the Ravens against the 49ers. Although I'm cheering hard for the Lions. I picked them at the beginning of the season. And it's on. If you go on my Twitter, I said it that the Detroit Lions would win their division and get to the NFC Championship game. So I got that right so far. I wouldn't mind seeing them get to their first Super Bowl.
I'm with you. I've got the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson, he's such a dual threat, and that Ravens defense, like you said, has been great. The Lions, my biggest issue for them, it's the secondary. They're just, they get torched.
Yeah, their defense.
Now the Niners, the Niners do have quite a few injuries, especially on the offensive side. Deebo Samuel is questionable. We saw McCaffrey trying to work out his calf muscles or his quads or something, right? He seemed like he was cramping up in that game. So we'll see, but I'm with you. I think it's going to be the Ravens and the 49ers, which should be a really entertaining Super Bowl. And yeah, another episode in the books. You can follow me on Twitter at Doug Venn. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Canucks Speak. Pete Gas, you can follow him, Pete_Gas on Twitter. And do check out our playlist on Spotify. It's the Canucks Speakeasy outro playlist.
We do have this tendency to forget to do this at the beginning of the show.
We do. When Pete's not here, we do.
I know. Pete's not here to keep us in line. I am Brendan, a.k.a. Jabo, and you can follow me at Jabo_Vancouver, Jabo. Also, we're on YouTube. Please go hit that subscribe button. And yes, let's hope the fun keeps going for the Canucks.
All right. Thanks for listening.